After the argument, my husband put me out of the car right in the middle of the highway, straight into the pouring rain. I was shivering from the cold until a black SUV slowed down beside me. An elderly man stepped out and said quietly, "Get in, baby girl. Pretend to be my kin, and I will help you in ways your husband can't even imagine." Welcome to the Twists of Fate channel. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to know. We hope you enjoy listening to this captivating story. Kaylani clutched her wet handkerchief, staring out the side window where heavy raindrops streamed down the glass. Blurred by the gray curtain of the downpour, the roadside trees flickered past. The air inside the car was heavy and tense, so thick she wanted to crack a window just to gulp down some fresh air, but she didn't dare move a muscle. "Do you even realize what you were saying back there?" Cordell's voice was low, almost a hiss. He always spoke like that when he was truly angry. "My mother asks you about work, a normal, polite question, and you start whining about being tired." "I wasn't whining," Kaylani objected quietly, not taking her eyes off the glass. "I just said I've had a lot to do lately." "A lot to do." Cordell slapped the steering wheel sharply, making Kaylani flinch. "You sit at home, pick up a few freelance gigs online, and you call that a lot to do? My mother raised 2 kids by herself at your age, worked double shifts, and never complained once." Kaylani bit her lip. Arguing was useless. She had realized that a long time ago. Cordell had a way of twisting her every word until she was the only one at fault. 3 years ago, when they first got married, everything was different. Back then, he called her his queen, bought her flowers, took her to nice soul food spots, and told her she was the most beautiful, intelligent woman in the world. Then, something broke. Maybe right after the wedding, maybe gradually. Kaylani couldn't remember anymore. "And that fake smile of yours," Cordell continued, speeding up the car on the wet asphalt. "You think Mama can't see you're forcing yourself to be there? That you think you're too good for my folks? Do you have any idea how that looks from the outside?" "Cordell, I really tried." Kaylani turned to him, exhaustion breaking through her voice. "I made the potato salad exactly how your mama likes it. I talked to everyone. I helped in the kitchen. I tried." He let out a mean chuckle. "You put too much paprika in the salad. Mama told me later, but she kept her mouth shut so she wouldn't upset you. And you talked like you were under interrogation. Yes, no, I don't know. My sister asks you about books, you got nothing. Shows, you don't watch them. Sports, you don't care. So what the hell is there to talk to you about?" Kaylani lowered her head. She really had felt terrible all evening. Her head was pounding, and waves of nausea kept rolling over her. For the last few weeks, she hadn't been sleeping well, waking up in the middle of the night with anxiety and getting up in the morning feeling shattered. But she didn't tell Cordell any of that. He wouldn't have understood anyway. He would have said she was making up problems out of thin air. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "Really? Tired? Tired from what?" Cordell raised his voice. "I pay the rent on the condo. I pay for everything. I pulled you out of that cramped apartment in the projects where you and your mama were living in one room. Do you even remember the conditions you were existing in? Now you have a normal home, a normal life, and what, you're tired?" Kaylani swallowed hard. He always threw her past in her face, her poverty, the gratitude she was supposedly supposed to feel every single second. Yes, she had lived with her mother in a tiny apartment in a rough complex. Yes, money was always tight, but it was warm there. Mama never yelled at her, never belittled her, never made her feel like she was nothing. "Cordell, let's not fight," she pleaded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "Please, I understand you're upset, but—" "Upset?" He turned his face toward her, anger splashing in his eyes. "I'm not upset, Kalani. I am furious because I am embarrassed by you. My parents invited us over, set a full table, and you sit there like a scarecrow ruining everyone's mood." "I didn't ruin the mood." Kaylani felt something inside her crack. "I just didn't know what to talk about. Your sister was discussing some expensive resort in Cabo she went to. I've never been there. Your mama was talking about renovations on the lake house. I don't know anything about that. What was I supposed to do? I listened, I nodded, I asked questions. Cordell punched the steering wheel again. Fake some interest, for God's sake. Is that so hard? My family is your family now, remember that. Kehlani turned back to the window. Gray, wet emptiness flew past the glass. The road, the woods, the rain. No cars, no lights. They were driving along a stretch of highway that connected his parents' affluent suburb to the city, and there were still about 20 miles to go. Kehlani imagined arriving, changing her clothes, taking a shower, getting into bed, and closing her eyes. Maybe tomorrow would be easier. Maybe tomorrow Cordell would cool down, and they could talk calmly. "Are you even listening to me?" he asked sharply. "I'm listening," Kehlani answered wearily. "Doesn't look like it." Cordell increased his speed, and the speedometer needle crept to the right. "Lately you've been living in another world. I talk to you, you're silent. I ask you something, you answer offbeat. What is wrong with you?" "Nothing." Kehlani closed her eyes. "Just tired. Tired again." Cordell laughed maliciously. "You know what, Kehlani? I think you're just ungrateful. I do everything for you, and you can't even show basic respect to my parents." "What does respect have to do with it?" Kehlani's voice trembled. "I respect your parents. I always try." "Don't give me that I try mess," he interrupted. "Results matter, not effort. And the result is this. Mama thinks you're strange. My sister thinks you're stuck up, and Pops doesn't say anything at all. But I see it on his face. He's disappointed." Kehlani felt tears burning her eyes. She didn't want to cry in front of him. Not now. But she had no strength left to hold it back. One tear rolled down her cheek, then another. "Here we go," Cordell grimaced. "The waterworks, like always. When you have nothing to say, you start bawling." "I'm not bawling." Kehlani quickly wiped her face with her palm. "I just don't understand what you want from me. I try, I really try, but nothing is ever good enough for you." "Because nothing is good enough," Cordell shouted, and Kehlani flinched again. "You live in your little world where everyone is supposed to pity and understand you, but in reality, you're selfish. I work like a dog to provide for us, and you can't even spend one normal evening with my family." Kehlani clenched her fists. A wave was rising inside her, not anger, but a terrible despair. She remembered how they met 3 years ago at the diner, where she was waitressing. Cordell had seemed so confident, successful, grown up. He was 8 years older, drove a nice car, courted her beautifully. She was a young, naive girl, tired of struggling, dreaming of stability. When he asked her to move in and then to marry him, she agreed without hesitation. But everything went wrong. Cordell turned out to be completely different. He demanded, controlled, criticized. He devalued everything she did and constantly reminded her that she owed him. And she stayed silent, endured it, hoping it was temporary, that he would change. "Maybe you should find someone else then?" Kehlani said quietly, not believing her own words. "Someone who fits in better with your parents." Cordell turned his head sharply toward her. "What did you say?" "I said maybe you need a different wife." Kehlani looked at him, pain breaking through her voice. "Because apparently I can't handle it." "Can't handle it?" he sneered. "You're not even trying to handle it. You just float downstream, waiting for me to solve everything for you." "That's not true," Kehlani shouted, surprised by the volume of her own voice. "I do everything I can. I clean, I cook, I support you when you have problems with your contracts. But it's never enough. You always find something to pick at." "Pick at?" Cordell swerved sharply onto the shoulder, and the car screeched to a halt. "It's not called picking at you, it's called pointing out your flaws. But of course, it's easier for you to say I'm picking on you." They sat on the empty highway with the rain drumming on the roof. Kehlani was breathing heavily, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. "You know what?" Cordell turned his whole body toward her, cold fury splashing in his eyes. "Get out!" "What?" Kehlani didn't understand. "I said, get out!" He pointed a finger at the door. "Get out of the car. Walk. Maybe by the time you get there, your brain will be in the right place." Cordell, are you joking? Kaylani felt a chill run down her spine. It's pouring rain. We're in the middle of the highway. So? He smiled coldly. You're so independent, so unhappy. So go. 6 or 7 miles to the city limits isn't that far. Cordell, please. Kaylani felt her voice shaking. Don't do this. Let's just go home. Calm down. I am calm, he cut her off. I'm just tired of your drama. Get out. Kaylani looked at him with wide eyes. Was he serious? Was he really ready to dump her here? In this weather, on an empty road? Get out, I said, he barked, so loud that Kaylani flinched again. With trembling hands, she unbuckled her seatbelt. Inside, everything shrank into a ball. Fear, hurt, despair. She reached for the door handle, still hoping he would stop her, tell her it was just a cruel joke. But Cordell stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Kaylani opened the door, and cold air rushed into the cabin along with sprays of rain. She stepped out onto the shoulder, and in a second she was soaked through. The rain was dense, heavy. It drummed on her head, her shoulders, flooded her eyes. Kaylani turned back to the car, hoping to see that Cordell had changed his mind. But he didn't even look at her. He just shifted gears, and the car tore off, splashing Kaylani with a wave of dirty water from a puddle. Kaylani stood on the shoulder, watching the red taillights of the retreating car until they dissolved into the gray mist of the rain. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to get warm, but the cold penetrated deeper. Her clothes stuck to her body, her hair hung in wet strands, water streamed down her face. There wasn't a soul around, just the empty highway, woods on both sides, and the endless downpour. Kaylani slowly walked forward, toward where the city was, miles away. Her feet slipped in her soaked shoes. Every step was a struggle. She thought about how unreal this all was, how this couldn't actually be happening. But the cold was too real, the rain too strong, and the pain in her chest too sharp. She had been walking for about 20 minutes when she realized she was completely exhausted. Her legs felt like lead, her breathing was ragged, and her wet clothes seemed to weigh a ton. She stopped for a second, leaned her hand against a roadside tree, and closed her eyes. Pain pulsed in her head. Black circles swam before her eyes. The rain didn't let up. It fell in a wall, turning the world into one solid gray sheet. Suddenly, from somewhere behind, she heard the sound of a motor. Kaylani turned and saw headlights cutting through the rain. The vehicle was approaching slowly, as if the driver was scanning the road. Kaylani stepped back closer to the shoulder, hoping for nothing. Who would pick up a soaked stranger in this weather? But the vehicle, a large black SUV, suddenly braked right next to her. Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was elderly, maybe in his 70s, wearing a dark coat and a fedora. He was tall, held himself upright despite his age, and there was a natural confidence in his movements. "Miss," he called out to Kaylani, approaching her, "what are you doing out here alone in this weather?" Kaylani opened her mouth to answer, but instead of words, something between a sob and a cough came out. She realized that her whole body was shaking from the cold and stress. "You're freezing," the man stated, coming closer. He looked at her closely, and genuine concern was readable in his gaze. "Did someone put you out?" Kaylani nodded, unable to utter a word. Tears streamed down her cheeks again, mixing with the rain. "Get in the car," he said softly, but firmly. "Immediately. You're soaked to the bone." He took her by the elbow and led her to the SUV. Kaylani walked like she was in a dream, not fully realizing what was happening. The man opened the front passenger door and helped her climb inside. It was warm in there, smelling of leather seats and expensive cologne. Kaylani sank into the seat and took a shuddering breath. After the icy rain, this warmth felt like heaven. The man walked around the car and got behind the wheel. He blasted the heater, and hot air blew from the vents. "You'll warm up in a second," he said. "Wait a minute." He reached into the back seat and pulled out a plaid blanket. Warm, soft. He draped it over Kaylani's shoulders. There, now breathe steady. Don't rush to talk if it's hard. Kaylani wrapped herself in the blanket, feeling the tremors gradually recede. She looked at her savior. Gray hair neatly brushed back, deep wrinkles around his eyes, but his gaze was lively and attentive. Strong hands, a luxury watch on his wrist. On the back seat lay a suit in a garment bag and a leather briefcase. Everything suggested this man was someone important. "Thank you," Kaylani finally squeezed out in a hoarse voice. "Thank you so much." "No need to thank me." He shook his head. "My name is Sterling Vance, and you are?" "Kaylani," she replied. "Very nice to meet you, Kaylani." He extended his hand, and she shook it. His handshake was firm and warm. "What happened? If it's not a secret, of course, though I assume a family quarrel?" Kaylani nodded, lowering her eyes. "My husband kicked me out of the car. We argued." "I see." Sterling frowned, looking out the window where the rain continued to pour. "What kind of—" He stopped, evidently choosing a milder word. "Foolish man, do you have to be to put a woman out on the highway in this weather?" Kaylani stayed silent. Foolish, cruel, selfish. Many words could describe what Cordell had done, but it all seemed so meaningless now, sitting in a warm car next to a stranger who turned out to be kinder than her own husband. "Do you have far to go?" Sterling asked. "To the city," Kaylani answered quietly. "Downtown is another 7 miles, probably." "I'll take you," he nodded. "But first—" He fell silent, as if wondering whether to speak further. Kaylani looked at him with curiosity. "I have a request for you," Sterling finally said, and there was a note of awkwardness in his voice. "It might seem strange, even ridiculous, but it's very important to me right now." "What request?" Kaylani asked cautiously. Sterling rubbed the bridge of his nose, then turned to her. "You see, in an hour, I have a very important meeting scheduled. A business dinner at a restaurant with potential partners. It's a huge deal, a lot depends on it. And one of the conditions my counterpart set, he wants to see that I'm a family man with strong kinship ties. You understand where I'm going?" Kaylani nodded slowly, though she wasn't sure she did. "Usually, I take my granddaughter to these meetings," Sterling continued. "Amara is a smart girl, studies law at Howard. She helps me create the right image. Grandfather with a loving granddaughter. Serious, grounded. But today she's sick, high fever, and I couldn't ask her to come, and the meeting cannot be rescheduled. The man flies overseas tomorrow. And you want me to—" Kaylani felt a wave of bewilderment rise inside her. "Pretend to be my granddaughter," Sterling finished for her. "Just sit nearby. Maybe say a few words if asked. Nothing complicated, but it would be a huge help to me." Kaylani looked at him, trying to figure out if he was joking, but his expression was absolutely serious. "I realize this sounds crazy," he added. "A strange man picks you up on the road and asks you to portray his relative. Sounds like the start of a thriller movie, right?" "Yes, a little," Kaylani admitted. And for the first time all evening, a shadow of a smile appeared in her voice. "But I'm not a maniac or a con artist," Sterling assured her. "I can show you ID, a business card, whatever you want. I own several construction companies, been living in the city for 30 years. I just found myself in a situation where I need help, and fate brought me to you." Kaylani was silent, thinking over his words. On one hand, it was truly strange and even dangerous to go somewhere with a stranger, to participate in some confusing scheme. On the other hand, this man had literally saved her, warmed her, offered help. And there was such sincerity in his eyes that Kaylani involuntarily believed him. "And what do I get in return?" she asked, surprised by her own directness. Sterling nodded approvingly. "The right question. Never agree to something without understanding the benefit. I'm ready to pay you cash if you want. But honestly, it seems to me you need something more than a one-time payment right now." "What do you mean?" Kaylani frowned. "I see that something serious happened to you," Sterling said calmly. "Your husband kicked you out of the car into the rain. That already says a lot. And judging by your eyes, This isn't the first time he's allowed himself that kind of attitude. Kaylani felt the lump rise in her throat again. She turned away to the window, not wanting to show tears. "I'm not the type to leave people in trouble," Sterling continued. "If you help me today, I will help you. I mean, really help, with housing, a job, a lawyer if needed. I have connections, resources, and I don't speak empty words." "Why?" Kaylani turned to him, disbelief in her voice. "Why do you want to help a strange woman?" Sterling was silent, looking straight ahead. Then he said quietly, "Many years ago, my daughter was in a similar situation. Her husband was a difficult man too. He didn't hit her, no, but he humiliated her, controlled her, stripped away all her independence. And when she finally decided to leave, she had no one to help her. I was too busy with business back then, didn't pay attention to her problems. And when I realized, it was too late. She went back to him because she didn't see another way out and spent another 10 years in hell before he left her for someone else." Kaylani listened, holding her breath. "Since then," Sterling continued, "I made a promise to myself. If I see a woman in trouble, if I can help, I will help. It's my personal atonement, if you will. I didn't save my daughter back then, but I can save others. And this isn't charity, not a handout. It's just right." Kaylani looked at him, and something turned over inside her. This man spoke so simply and honestly that it was impossible not to believe him. "Okay," she said quietly. "I agree. I'll be your granddaughter tonight." Sterling turned to her and smiled for the first time in the conversation. "Thank you, Kaylani. I give you my word, I won't let you down." He shifted gears, and the car moved smoothly. The rain still drummed on the roof, but inside the cabin, it was warm and calm. Kaylani closed her eyes, feeling the tension slowly release. She didn't know what awaited her ahead, but in that moment, for the first time in months, she felt something resembling hope. "Tell me a little about yourself," Sterling asked, keeping his eyes on the road. "So we look convincing. Where did you go to school? What do you do?" "I graduated with a degree in education," Kaylani began, choosing her words. "I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, but after the wedding, my husband said teachers' salaries were too small, and it was better for me to stay home. Now I freelance sometimes, writing copy, articles for websites." "A noble profession, teaching," Sterling nodded approvingly. "A pity it wasn't used. And how long have you been with your husband?" 3 years. Kaylani sighed. "At first, everything was good. He was attentive, caring, and then, I don't know what changed. Maybe I changed? Or he showed his true face." "Likely the latter," Sterling noted. "People rarely change fundamentally. More often, they just stop pretending." Kaylani fell silent, looking out the window. Then she added quietly, "His name is Cordell. Cordell Banks. He works as a contractor, owns a small construction firm. He's constantly talking about moving up, looking for big contracts, networking with investors. For him, it's all work, money, status, and me, I'm like an accessory to him, you know? I have to look good, behave correctly, not embarrass him in front of the right people." Sterling glanced at her sideways. "Banks, you say? Construction firm?" "Yes," Kaylani nodded. "Why?" "Nothing." Sterling frowned as if recalling something. "Just the name sounded familiar. In our industry, everyone knows everyone. It's a small circle." He paused, then added more softly, "Well then, Kaylani, fate sometimes arranges things strangely. Maybe tonight will change everything. For you, definitely, and maybe for him too." "Is your real granddaughter real?" Kaylani decided to change the subject. "Does she help you often?" "Amara," Sterling smiled. "Yes, she's amazing. Smart, responsible. Studying to be a lawyer, by the way. Says she wants to work in my company, help with contracts, live separately. We see each other rarely. She has her life, her business. But Amara comes by often. We drink tea, we talk. Kaylani felt her heart squeeze with sympathy. This man, successful, wealthy, also had his losses and pains. But he hadn't become bitter, hadn't closed off. On the contrary, he continued to help others. "Here we are," Sterling announced, turning toward a large building with a sign that read, "The Summit." Kaylani recognized this restaurant, one of the most expensive in the city, famous for its rooftop views and high-end soul fusion. She had never been here, only seen photos on Instagram. Cordell had promised to bring her here for their anniversary a couple of times, but the promise remained just a promise. Sterling stopped the car in the valet lane and turned off the engine. He turned to Kaylani, looking her over carefully. "We have another 10 minutes. Listen, I understand you're soaked, but maybe you can freshen up a bit? There are wipes in the glove compartment, and on the back seat, there should be Amara's spare jacket. It's about your size." Kaylani nodded and reached for the glove box. She took out wet wipes, wiped her face, smoothed her hair. Sterling handed her a dark blue blazer over the seat back. Stylish, clearly expensive. "Thanks." Kaylani took off her soaked windbreaker and pulled on the blazer. It was a little big, but overall, it looked good. "That's much better," Sterling approved. "Now the main thing, act natural. No one is going to interrogate you. Just a couple of questions out of politeness, if they ask anything at all. Just stay close, smile, and everything will be fine." Kaylani took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. "I'll try." They got out of the car and headed to the restaurant entrance. Kaylani walked beside Sterling, trying not to think about how ridiculous this whole situation looked. Half an hour ago, she was trudging through the rain on the highway, and now she was walking into a luxury restaurant, pretending to be the granddaughter of a stranger. At the entrance, they were met by the maitre d', a tall man in an impeccable suit. "Good evening, Mr. Vance," he greeted with a slight bow. "Your table is ready. The guests have already arrived and are waiting for you." "Thank you, Michael." Sterling nodded. They walked through a spacious hall with high ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Kaylani couldn't help looking around. Everything here breathed luxury and taste. Heavy velvet curtains, plush carpets, live jazz playing softly in the corner. Well-dressed people sat at tables, conducting quiet conversations. The maitre d' led them to a private room, smaller but no less elegant. At a long table covered with a snow-white tablecloth, 4 men were already sitting. 3 of them were about Sterling's age, over 60, dignified, inexpensive suits. And the 4th? Kaylani froze, feeling the earth slip from under her feet. The 4th man was Cordell. Her husband sat at the head of the table, casually leaning back in his chair with a glass of water in his hand. He was saying something to his neighbor, smiling that strained smile Kaylani knew so well. Businesslike, artificial. And when his gaze slid to the door, where she and Sterling stood, the smile froze on his face. For a second, it seemed time stopped. Cordell looked at Kaylani with wide eyes, and in them she read surprise, confusion, and something else. Fear. Kaylani felt her own heart beating at a frantic speed. What was he doing here? How was this possible? Bishop Eldridge, one of the older men at the table, rose to meet them with a broad smile. "Finally! We were waiting for you." Sterling shook his hand. "Apologies for the slight delay, Bishop. Traffic, you understand?" "Oh, nonsense. Everything is fine." Eldridge waved it off, looking Kaylani over. "And this, I assume, is the famous granddaughter you were telling us about?" "Yes, my Amara." Sterling put his arm around Kaylani's shoulders, and his voice sounded with such natural warmth that even she believed in their kinship for a moment. "She agreed to keep me company. She's my smart girl, a student." "Very nice," Eldridge nodded gallantly. "Please, sit down." Sterling pulled out a chair for Kaylani, and she sank into it, trying not to look in Cordell's direction, but she felt his gaze, heavy, drilling. Sterling sat next to her, on the left, and on the right was one of the older men, who introduced himself as Mr. Beauregard, the financial director. "So, gentlemen," Bishop Eldridge began once everyone was seated, Let's introduce everyone again for order's sake. I am Bishop Eldridge, representing the investors. This is my colleague, Mr. Beauregard, handling the financials. And this, he nodded at the third older man sitting opposite, is Thaddeus Moore, our chief architect. All three nodded in turn. Kaylani smiled timidly in response, still avoiding Cordell's eyes. And finally, Eldridge turned to Cordell. Cordell Banks, a young but very promising contractor. It is his firm we are considering as the executor for the construction part of the project. Cordell smiled tightly and tilted his head slightly. Kaylani allowed herself to look at him directly for the first time. He was pale. Beads of sweat had appeared on his forehead. Their eyes met for a split second, and Kaylani saw a plea in his eyes. Silence. Don't say anything. And you, Mr. Vance, as I understand, will be the general contractor, Eldridge continued. Your company, Vance Global, has a solid reputation. You have the experience, the connections, the standing. That is precisely why we wanted to meet today, to discuss details, to understand how you see the collaboration. Of course, Sterling answered calmly. I am ready to discuss all aspects, but first, allow us to order dinner. We're talking business, but my baby girl here is probably starving. He patted Kaylani paternally on the hand, and she nodded gratefully. In reality, she didn't want to eat at all. Her stomach was tied in a knot from tension. The waiter brought the menu, and the process of choosing dishes began. Kaylani mechanically named the first thing she saw, not even reading the description. All her attention was riveted on Cordell, who sat diagonally from her, clearly trying to keep it together. So, gentlemen, Bishop Eldridge set aside the menu and folded his hands on the table. Let's get to business. We have a serious project, a mixed-use residential complex, 3,000 units, infrastructure, park zones. Term, 3 years. The budget, as you know, is substantial. And it is important for us to understand that we are working with reliable people who share our values. And what values do you have in mind? Sterling inquired, leaning back in his chair. Family, Eldridge answered firmly. Responsibility, integrity. You see, Mr. Vance, I am a man of the old school. For me, it is important that a partner is not just a good businessman, but a decent human being. One who knows how to build relationships with loved ones knows how to build business relationships. That is my deep conviction. I completely agree, Sterling nodded. Family is the foundation. Without a strong foundation, any building will collapse, right? Exactly, Eldridge rejoiced. That is why I asked everyone to come with family. Wanted to see what kind of people we have on the team. You, I see, have a wonderful granddaughter. He smiled at Kaylani again, and she tried to smile back, feeling like an actress in a poorly rehearsed play. And you, Mr. Banks, Eldridge turned to Cordell, are also married, as I understand? Cordell hesitated for a second, then nodded. Yes, married. 3 years. Wonderful. Eldridge nodded approvingly. And why didn't you bring your spouse? It would have been nice to meet her. Kaylani felt her heart skip a beat. She watched Cordell trying to maintain an impassive expression. She had things to do, he finally squeezed out. Unfortunately, couldn't make it. A pity. Eldridge was genuinely upset. Well, nothing to be done. Maybe next time. And how do you relate to family values, young man? What are your principles in this regard? Cordell cleared his throat. I believe that family is very important. It is a pillar, a support system. I try to be an attentive husband to take care of my wife. Kaylani felt something boiling inside her. Takes care. Attentive husband. This man kicked her out of the car into the pouring rain an hour ago, and now he sits here lying to the faces of respected men. Sterling turned to Kaylani and asked quietly, Are you okay, grandbaby? You look a little pale. Kaylani, startled, pulled from her thoughts. Yes, everything is fine, Granddad. Just a little tired. She pronounced the word Granddad with such difficulty, as if her tongue was twisting. But Sterling squeezed her hand encouragingly under the table. Appetizers arrived, exquisite, beautifully plated seafood. Mr. Beauregard began talking about the financial model of the project, and the conversation flowed smoothly into technical details. Kaylani sat silently, mechanically picking at her salad with a fork. Cordell was also silent, occasionally inserting some remarks, but it was clear his thoughts were far away. "Tell me, Mr. Banks," Bishop Eldridge spoke up again suddenly. "Do you have children?" "Not yet," Cordell answered, uncertainty in his voice. "Planning to?" "Well, yes, of course, in the future." "That is right," Eldridge nodded. "Children are the meaning of life, you know. I have 3 grandkids, and I can't imagine my life without them." Sterling smiled. "I have 1 granddaughter, but she is dearer to me than anything in the world. True, Amara?" He looked at Kaylani again with such warmth that for a moment she wished it were true, that she really had such a grandfather, kind, wise, caring. "True," she answered quietly. Thaddeus Moore, the architect who had been silent until then, suddenly leaned forward and looked at Cordell. "And what does your wife do, if it's not a secret?" Cordell choked on his water, coughed, wiped his mouth with a napkin. "She writes articles, works remotely." "Interesting," Moore nodded. "Means she's a modern woman, independent. That is good. And do you support her in this? Or would you like her to just take care of the house?" Kaylani tensed, waiting for the answer. Cordell clearly didn't know what to say. He shifted his gaze from one interlocutor to another, trying to figure out which answer would be the correct one. "I support her, of course," he finally forced out. "The main thing is for a person to do what they like." "Wise words," Eldridge approved. "Means you have equality in the family. You consult with each other, make decisions together." "Yes, naturally." Cordell nodded, and Kaylani saw a vein bulging on his temple. Sterling slowly drank his water, watching Cordell closely, then suddenly asked as if in passing, "And how do you handle situations when conflicts arise in the family? How do you solve them?" Cordell froze. Kaylani froze too, not breathing. "Well, we try to talk," Cordell answered cautiously. "Find a compromise." "Talk," Sterling repeated thoughtfully. "That is right. Because, you know, I've met men who think that if they provide for the family, they have the right, let's say, not to stand on ceremony, to dictate their terms, issue ultimatums. You're not one of those, I hope?" "No, of course not," Cordell answered quickly, but his voice wavered. Sterling continued to look at him with a long, heavy gaze, then slowly said, "You understand, Mr. Banks, I've been in construction all my life, and I know, if the foundation is cracked, if there are voids in it, lies, the building won't stand long. No matter what beautiful facades are erected on top. This applies to houses and people and relationships." There was such steel in his words that everyone at the table went quiet. Bishop Eldridge looked at Sterling in surprise, then at Cordell. "Mr. Vance, what are you getting at?" he asked. Sterling set down his glass and turned to Eldridge. "I'm getting at the fact that an hour ago, on my way here, I picked up a woman on the highway. She was soaked through, freezing, in a state of shock. Her husband kicked her out of the car in the middle of the road in the pouring rain after an argument, just put her out and drove off." Everyone at the table froze. Eldridge frowned. "What kind of story is this?" Sterling put a hand on Kaylani's shoulder. "This woman is not my granddaughter. Her name is Kaylani, and she is the wife of Cordell Banks." The silence that hung in the room was deafening. Cordell turned as white as a sheet. His hands, resting on the table, began to shake. This is some kind of mistake," he rasped. "I don't understand." "Don't understand?" Sterling raised a brow. "All right, let me explain. Half an hour ago, you were telling us what a wonderful husband you are, how you care for your wife, how you value family. But in fact, you left her alone at night on an empty highway in the rain. The woman who trusted you, married you, gave you 3 years of her life." "Mr. Vance, this isn't what it looks like." Cordell tried to object, but his voice was cracking. "We just had an argument. Domestic, ordinary." "Ordinary?" Sterling raised his voice. "You consider it normal to put a human being out of a car on a highway? That is your idea of an ordinary argument?" Bishop Eldridge slowly leaned back in his chair, folding his arms over his chest. His face was impenetrable, but the gaze directed at Cordell had turned hard. "Mr. Banks," he said coldly, "is this true?" Cordell opened his mouth, then closed it. His gaze darted between Sterling, Eldridge, and Kaylani. He was clearly looking for a way out, some explanation, but finding nothing. We argued," he finally squeezed out. "She got out herself." "I didn't get out myself," Kaylani said quietly but firmly, speaking up for the first time all evening. "You told me to get out. You said, 'Walk, maybe your brain will get in the right place.'" All eyes turned to her. Kaylani felt her hands trembling, but she continued, "You kicked me out of the car and drove away, and I walked in the rain on the highway, not knowing if I would make it to the city. If not for Mr. Vance, I don't know what would have happened to me." "Kaylani, enough." Cordell tried to fake a condescending smile. "You're exaggerating. I just wanted you to cool off a little." "Cool off?" Kaylani felt a wave rising inside her, one she had been holding back for months, years. "I could have frozen. I could have been hit by a car. You didn't care? You just didn't care." "God, Kaylani, don't make a scene." Cordell nervously ran a hand over his face. "We'll sort this out at home. No, now is not the time or place." "And when is the time?" Her voice shook. "When you scream at me again. When you tell me I'm ungrateful, that you pulled me out of the dirt, and I don't even say thank you." Bishop Eldridge sighed heavily and stood up from the table. "Gentlemen, I think our meeting is finished." "Bishop, wait!" Cordell jumped up, extending a hand. "This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain." "I don't need explanations, young man." Eldridge cut him off. "I see everything with my own eyes. A man who treats his own wife like that cannot be a reliable partner. The deal is off." Cordell looked confusedly at the others at the table, seeking support. Mr. Beauregard and Thaddeus Moore were silently gathering their things, avoiding meeting his gaze. "Mr. Vance," Eldridge turned to him, "we will contact you shortly to discuss further cooperation, without the participation of Mr. Banks, of course." Sterling nodded. "Thank you, Bishop. I am always available." The three men headed for the exit. Cordell remained standing at the table, pale, face twitching. He looked at Kaylani, and in his eyes, rage and despair were readable. "You," he hissed, "you ruined everything. You destroyed a deal I've been preparing for 6 months." "I didn't destroy anything," Kaylani answered wearily. "You destroyed it yourself with your own hands." Cordell stepped toward her, but Sterling stood between them. "Young man, I advise you to leave right now." "That's my wife!" Cordell shouted. "I have the right." "You have no rights," Sterling interrupted him coldly. "You lost them the moment you kicked her out on the highway. Leave before I call security." Cordell stood for a few more seconds, breathing heavily, then turned sharply and walked to the exit. At the door, he turned back. "You'll regret this, Kaylani. You're left with nothing. No house, no money, no me." "With pleasure," Kaylani answered quietly. Cordell slammed the door, and the room became quiet again. Kaylani sank into the chair, feeling tears flowing down her cheeks. But these weren't tears of grief. It was relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her soul. Sterling sat next to her and handed her a clean handkerchief. "It's okay, baby girl. It's all behind you now." Kaylani took the handkerchief and wiped her eyes. "Thank you for everything, if not for you." "Hush." Sterling stopped her. "No need to thank me. Circumstances just align that way. Now let's go. We need to decide what to do next." Kaylani nodded and stood up. They left the restaurant and walked out onto the street. The rain had stopped. The air was fresh and cool. Kaylani took a deep breath, feeling her lungs fill with cleanliness. For the first time in a long time, she felt something resembling freedom. Sterling started the car and drove out of the restaurant parking lot. For a while, they drove in silence. Kaylani looked out the window where the night lights of the city flickered, and he drove with concentration. Finally, he broke the silence. "Kaylani, do you have somewhere to go tonight? Relatives? Friends?" Kaylani thought. Mama lived in that same cramped apartment where they used to huddle. She could go back there, but Kaylani didn't want to explain, to tell the story, to see the pity in her mother's eyes. Friends were almost non-existent after 3 years of marriage. Cordell had gradually distanced her from everyone who was close. He criticized her girlfriends, caused scandals after she met them, or simply forbade her to go anywhere. And Kaylani had gradually given up, stopped maintaining contact. "I have my mama," she answered quietly, "but I don't want to go to her right now. Don't want to upset her, explain all this." "I understand," Sterling nodded. "Then I propose this. I have a small apartment in Midtown, a 2-bedroom condo. I keep it for Amara when she stays in the city overnight, but right now it's empty. You can stay there for a while until you decide what to do next." Kaylani turned to him. "Mr. Vance, you've already done so much for me. I can't accept this." "You can," he said firmly, "and you will. I gave my word to help you, and I keep it. This isn't charity or a handout. I just have the ability to help a person in trouble, and I'm doing it, period." Kaylani felt tears welling up again. In one evening, this stranger had shown her more care and concern than her husband had in 3 years. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." "Live well," Sterling simply answered. "That will be the best thanks." They arrived at a quiet street in Midtown. The building was a renovated brownstone, beautiful and well kept. Sterling led Kaylani to the 3rd floor and opened the door to the apartment. Inside, it was clean and cozy. A small hallway, a bright living room with a sofa and bookshelves, a separate bedroom with a wide bed. Everything was furnished with taste, but without excessive luxury, just comfortable. "This is where you'll stay," Sterling said, turning on the lights. "There should be some food in the fridge. Amara was here recently. The sheets are clean. If you need anything, call me. Don't hesitate." He took a business card from his pocket and handed it to Kaylani. "My number. Tomorrow I'll stop by, bring you some cash for the start, and we'll discuss future plans. For now, rest. You've survived a hard day." Kaylani took the card with trembling fingers. "Mr. Vance, Good night, Kaylani." He gently interrupted her. "Everything will be fine, I promise." When the door closed behind him, Kaylani was left alone in the silence of the strange apartment. She walked slowly through the rooms, still not believing the reality of what was happening. She went into the bathroom, saw her reflection in the mirror. Pale face, red eyes, disheveled hair. She looked exhausted, but a new gleam had appeared in her eyes. The gleam of hope. Kaylani took a hot shower, washing away the remnants of that nightmare day. She put on a terry cloth robe she found in the closet and lay down in bed. The bed was soft, the pillows smelled fresh. Kaylani closed her eyes and for the first time in many months fell asleep calmly, without fear or anxiety. Morning came sunny and bright. Kaylani woke up from the light breaking through the curtains and for a second forgot where she was. Then everything came back, yesterday evening. The argument, the rain, meeting Sterling Vance, the scene at the restaurant. She sat up in bed, hugging her knees. What now? How to live from here? The doorbell rang. Kaylani tightened the robe and went to open it. On the threshold stood Sterling with a large bag in his hands. "Good morning," he smiled. "I brought you some clothes. Asked Amara to pick something suitable. And breakfast." He lifted a second bag. "Fresh bagels, cream cheese, coffee." Kaylani stepped back, letting him into the apartment. "You're so early. Thank you." "I'm an early bird," Sterling shrugged. "Up at 6:00 a.m. already. Let's go to the kitchen, have breakfast and talk." They sat at the small kitchen table. Sterling took out the bagels, butter, jam, cheese. Kaylani looked at all of it and felt the lump in her throat. When was the last time someone took care of her like this? "Eat, don't be shy," Sterling encouraged her, pouring coffee into cups. "And while you do, I'll tell you what I came up with for you." Kaylani took a bite of a bagel and started listening. First, housing. Sterling began. This apartment is at your disposal for at least 3 months. During this time, you'll be able to get on your feet, find a job, save up for your own place. I'll pay the utilities. Don't worry about that. Mr. Vance, wait. I haven't finished. He raised a hand. Second, work. My office needs an administrator, a person to greet clients, answer phones, handle documentation. Nothing complicated, but the job is stable, the salary is decent. If you agree, you can start next week. Kaylani looked at him with wide eyes. You're offering me a job? Yes. He nodded calmly. I really need an admin. It's not a made-up position. The previous girl went on maternity leave a month ago, and we haven't been able to find a replacement since, so you'll be doing me a favor if you agree. Kaylani felt warmth spreading inside. A job, a home, a chance to start over. And third, Sterling continued, a lawyer. You will need to file for divorce, and preferably do it correctly so your husband has no claims against you. I have a good attorney. She'll help you with all the documents. That is also on my dime. Don't worry. Kaylani put the cup on the table because her hands started to shake. Why are you doing all this? I'm nobody to you, just a chance meeting. Sterling sipped his coffee, then looked her in the eye. I told you yesterday about my daughter, how she suffered in her marriage, and I didn't help her in time. 20 years have passed since then, but I still can't forgive myself. And you know what I realized over these years? That kindness shouldn't be put off for later. When you see a person in trouble and can help, you need to help immediately, without hesitation, because later might be too late. Kaylani felt tears flowing down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Sterling handed her a napkin. Just agree. Take the job, live here, divorce that man, and build a new life. You are young, smart. You have everything ahead of you. Don't let the past hold you back. Kaylani wiped her tears and nodded. I agree. I agree to everything. Thank you, Mr. Vance, for everything. The following days flew by like a blur. Kaylani met with the lawyer Sterling recommended, a strict black woman in her 50s with a piercing gaze. She listened to the story, asked clarifying questions, and assured her that the divorce would go quickly and painlessly. You have no children together, practically no joint assets, the lawyer explained. The apartment is rented in your husband's name. The car is his too. So there's nothing to split. We file the petition, and in a month or so, you're free. Cordell called Kaylani several times. At first he screamed, accused, demanded she return. Then he tried to play on her pity, said he missed her, that he would change everything, that they could start over. Kaylani listened to him and wondered how she used to fall for these manipulations. Now everything was so transparent, so obvious. She calmly answered that their relationship was over, that she was filing for divorce and didn't want any more communication. After the 5th call, Cordell stopped blowing up her phone. A week later, Kaylani started work. The office of Vance Global was in a modern business center on the 7th floor, a spacious lobby with panoramic windows, a comfortable reception area where her desk stood. Sterling introduced her to the colleagues, friendly people who welcomed the newcomer warmly and without unnecessary questions. The work turned out to not be as complicated as Kaylani feared. Taking calls, scheduling client meetings, maintaining the database, ordering office supplies. She quickly got into the rhythm, mastered the software, memorized the names of regular clients, and most importantly, she liked it. She liked feeling useful, a needed part of a team. In the evenings, she returned to the apartment, cooked herself dinner, read books she had been putting off for a long time. She called Mama, told her she was doing well, that she found a job and was living apart from Cordell. Mama worried at first, asked questions, but Kaylani calmed her down, promised to visit soon and tell her everything. Sometimes Amara, Sterling's granddaughter, stopped by, a cheerful, energetic girl of 22 with natural curls and mischievous eyes. They quickly became friends. Amara talked about university, her boyfriend, her plans for the future. Kaylani listened and envied her in a good way. That was how one should live, lightly, freely, not looking back at others' opinions. A month passed. The court hearing was quick, formal. Cordell didn't even show up, sent a representative. Kaylani received the divorce decree and felt the last weight fly off her soul. She was no longer someone's wife. She was just Kaylani. And it was wonderful. Sterling invited her to lunch at the same restaurant where it all began. They sat at a table by the window, and Kaylani looked at the city bathed in autumn sunlight. "So?" Sterling asked, smiling. "How do you feel?" "Free," Kaylani answered honestly. "For the first time in many years, truly free." "That is good," he nodded. "Any plans for the future?" Kaylani thought. "I want to save up money and rent my own apartment. A small one, a studio, but mine. I want to finish recertification courses, maybe return to teaching later. And I just want to live, just be happy, without fear, without constant tension." "Wonderful plans," Sterling approved. "And you will succeed, I am sure. You are a strong woman, Kaylani. Just before you had no one to tell you that." "I missed you," Kaylani smiled. "A grandfather like you, who would support and believe in me." "Well, I'm not going anywhere," Sterling shrugged. "Consider me your adopted granddad. Amara already calls you her sister, so we are one family now." Kaylani felt her eyes moisten, but these were tears of joy, not grief. That evening, returning to the apartment, she walked to the window and looked at the street. It was raining, just like back then, on that terrible evening. But now Kaylani wasn't afraid of it. She stood in warmth, in safety, in her own space. And the rain outside the window seemed not like a threat, but just rain, a part of the world that no longer frightened her. 6 months later, Kaylani really did rent her own apartment, a small studio on the outskirts of Buckhead. Sterling helped with the move. Amara brought houseplants as a gift. The three of them drank tea in the new place, and Kaylani looked at them and understood that this was real happiness. Not in a big apartment, not in expensive things, not in the status of a married woman, but in freedom, in being surrounded by people who appreciate you just for being you. Cordell didn't appear in her life again. Sometimes rumors reached her that he had married again, to some young girl. Kaylani felt neither anger nor resentment, only a slight pity for that girl and hope that she would have the strength to leave in time if things went wrong. And another 6 months later, Kaylani signed up for teacher recertification courses and began preparing to return to her profession. Sterling supported her in every way, saying that good teachers were always in short supply, that she would definitely find a job. And one evening, when Kaylani was sitting on her small balcony with a cup of tea watching the stars, she suddenly realized life had begun anew. That terrible evening in the rain turned out not to be the end, but the beginning of the path to her true self. She remembered Sterling Vance's words spoken on the first evening. "Everything will be fine, I promise." And he hadn't lied. Everything really did become fine. Not immediately, not without difficulties, but gradually life straightened out, filled with meaning and joy. Kaylani finished her tea, went into the apartment, and opened her laptop. She began writing a letter to Sterling, just because to thank him again, share news, tell him about her plans. He always replied to her emails, asked about her affairs, gave advice. "Dear Mr. Vance," she began typing, "I want to say thank you, not for the first time, and probably not for the last. Thank you for stopping on the road that day, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for showing me that kindness exists, and people are ready to help just like that, expecting nothing in return. You changed my life, and I promise I won't let you down, that I will become the person you saw in me that rainy evening." She reread what was written, hit send, and smiled. Life continued, and it was beautiful. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.